Hello, Cassandra. Good morning. Can you hear me? So I'm going to start recording and I'm going to share my screen. And let's start with this. Okay. So let's start with this. All right, here we go. Now, just for you guys to know, let me just move this around here. There we go. For some reason, and this is not necessarily my fault or anybody's fault, Zoom has, when people log into Zoom and they're watching a webinar and I play the presentation, what happens is that the sound goes at one speed and the image goes in another speed. So sometimes I'll be talking and the slide in your screen will not change. So in order to avoid that, I'm just going to play the slides one by one like this, in this format, okay? And this is all dependent on the internet speed, the quality of your connection. It has nothing to do with where I'm standing. I have a good and pretty solid internet speed, but because we have people from all over the world, things vary, you know? So I am gonna leave it as it is and we're gonna move forward. We're gonna have two topics to discuss today. We're gonna talk a little bit about calcium releasing materials and their application in restorative dentistry. And also we're gonna talk a little bit about the secrets to bonding to zirconia, all right? So we're gonna start with the calcium releasing component and then calcium releasing materials component, and then we'll move on to zirconia bonding. So this is part of my adhesive dentistry lecture. And, you know, first of all, those of you who don't know me, I am a dentist. I've been a dentist since 1995. I have a biomaterials degree from University of Alabama here in the United States. Currently, I am the manager of clinical research at Bisco Incorporated. So that's my current job. I practiced for 22 years, and then I decided that I wanted to pursue a different path in my dental career. I have been doing research on bonding for, you know, almost 2 decades. I've been doing a lot of testing and help develop products, and I have a very comprehensive understanding on how to develop products. And I've been part of many teams that have been involved in many products that Bisco has launched into the market. So it's been a very exciting ride. It's not me. It's always I'm always part of a team. I don't do things by myself. That's impossible. One individual does everything. That doesn't resonate with the way we do things at Bisco. It's always a team effort. So I am part of a wonderful team, and I am truly enjoying my current position. So one of the things I have to do that I'm responsible for is to share the information with our partners from around the world and from people who are interested in learning about our technology and the way we approach adhesive dentistry and the way we promote how to properly perform clinical procedures, and of course, how to optimize, again, the procedures in order to achieve the best clinical performance in all types of restoration. So in order to understand a little bit about the process of bonding and the process of bonding to any substrate, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's very simple. It's very simple. The process is, it's only one. To achieve bonding, it's only one. the process, and it's always the same. It's always the same. You need to generate some mechanical retention one way or another in order to achieve good bond. And the mechanical retention can be done by etching or by sandblasting, depending on the substrate. All you need to understand is your substrate, but the process is always the same, you know? And then after you've done your mechanical retention, you achieve that, and then you need to generate some chemical interaction, some priming of the surface. And depending on the surface, you're going to have the options of using different primers. There are products that are multi-surface. They can work in different surfaces. Okay, there are other products that are dedicated, or they are better to work on very specific surfaces. But it all depends. It all depends on the surface, and it all depends on what you have available in your market. But as long as you understand mechanical retention and chemical interaction, all you have to do now is understand your substrate, because the process is the same, and the substrate is what's going to basically determine the method. And the method is how you achieve the process, is how you go about the process. But it's always the same. Again, mechanical retention and chemical interaction. We will go through this a little bit deeper when we when we talk about zirconia bonding, right? But right now, let's talk about a different type of approach that is not necessarily related to optimize bonding, but to optimize performance, okay? To optimize performance. So from a restorative perspective, we at BISCO, when it comes down to bonding to the tooth structure, we recommend the use of a technique called selective etch. And I'm sorry, I have to try to find somewhere. Okay, I think, here we go. I'm sorry, I kind of like missed the slide. Here we go. So that's a technique that we recommend. There is a reason for that. And the reason for that is that when you etch enamel selectively, you are going to achieve the optimized bonding to enamel, all right? And that is what you want to do, because enamel, the enamel surfaces where you are going to seal that restoration, right? You're going to seal that, that tooth when you place your composite. Bonding to dentin is a little bit more complex. It's a little bit more complicated, because you could achieve it by etching it with phosphoric acid, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can do that. However, with the new universal bonding agent, specifically with All-Bond Universal, which is our flagship adhesive, you can achieve the same bond, very, very similar bond in self-etch mode, without having to go through the hassle of dealing with wet bonding. How wet is wet? What is the proper amount of moisture? And then you have activation of MMPs, and then you open the door for post-op sensitivity. Now, if you have mastered the total etch technique, and then, you know, that technique is working for you, and then that's okay. And then you keep on doing that. There's nothing wrong with that. You know that when you activate MMPs, and then you have to adjust that activation by deactivating the enzymes by either using chlorhexidine or using a benzalkonium chloride containing etchant such as Select HV. And you know, you're going to take care of that. But if you don't want to think about any of that, if you don't want to worry about that, and then you can think about selective etch. And we are not against total etch. We just recommend selective etch because it's the most hassle-free technique, and it's very effective. And in combination with All-Bond Universal, it's going to work very, very well. All right. But when you etch your dentin, you can, you know, you are going to encounter some issues that you have to solve. You have to attack. You have to basically make sure that you're covering all the issues and you're taking care of them. All right. So this is my approach, and this is what I recommend to my colleagues. the first thing you have to think about, if you're deep in a preparation, when you're deep in a preparation, and I'm not even talking about being very close to the pulp, but you're deep, and the assessment of deep is based upon the size of the restoration that you're doing. You're not on a shallow dentin. You're kind of like in a deep dentin. My recommendation is to start thinking about protecting the dentin, because when you protect the dentin, you are going to provide a better service. And dentin is very frail, it's very delicate, okay? It's a very delicate substrate. You have to be very careful. Enamel is a little bit more forgiving. You can etch enamel, you can dry enamel, you can leave it moist, and it's going to be fine. Dentin is a little bit more complex, and you have to be more careful. So a way of approaching this is just don't etch it with phosphoric acid. You're still going to have to generate mechanical retention, but you're going to be able to do that using a universal bonding agent, such as All Bond Universal. You're not going to find any problems. But when you think about protecting the dentin, okay, you don't etch it, but let's put something on top of it as a liner or a base that would protect the dentin, insulate it, and also protect the pulp, which is ultimately what we're trying to maintain, vital. And this is very important. So in the past, we've had many products, such as glass ionomer right here, and calcium hydroxide, TheraCal, that have been used as liners and bases in order to protect and insulate the pulp. This is the good old sandwich technique. However, there is no scientific data out there that will support the use of a liner or a base that will actually have an impact on the clinical performance of a restoration. When you think about clinical performance, you can't really rely on one variable. There are so many variables involved, but there is no scientific information, especially when they have been clinical studies and randomized clinical trials and survival table analysis and all of that. However, the products that have been evaluated are not necessarily the newer products. And we have learned a lot in the past 50 years about product development and product performance. That is an absolute truth. That's a fact. So one of the things we've learned, it started probably in the mid-90s, is that MTA, mineral trioxide aggregate, has a very interesting effect when you apply it on dentin. This was developed for endo reasons, and now is gravitating towards restorative. So what kind of products that are in MTA are effective on dentin? Well, the main product is calcium silicate. Calcium silicate has a great effect on dentin. It generates an alkaline pH. It induces the precipitation of hydroxyapatite crystals. It promotes pulp healing and promotes pulp vitality, and also promotes the generation of new dentin surface, a new dentin bridge. So products like, for example, biodentine and TheraCal release a lot of calcium, and that will have a positive impact. So what's going to happen is that I would like to see those studies that were conducted using glass ionomer and TheraCal with new materials, what's going to happen in 10 years. So in my mind, I believe that calcium silicate and these MTA-like type of materials are providing a wonderful array of benefits into the restorative dental world. So I don't see a reason why we should not use them, because what they are proven to provide right now is nothing but great things, okay? So using products like biodentine or TheraCal LC is something that we have to consider. So when you look at a restorative situation, such as this one, I'm gonna move this a little bit, and you look at a pulp exposure, can you use an MTA type of material here, such as TheraCal or biodentine? Yeah, you can. Is it gonna work? Well, it's difficult to assess. I have a question here. Somebody's raising their hand. I'm gonna tell you guys, and I'm sorry I didn't say this at the beginning, I am going to answer all questions, but you need to let me finish, okay? So that way I will answer all of your questions. And even if some questions are left unanswered, you can email me, you can email your distributor, you can email the person who provided you with a link for this webinar, and your question will be answered for sure. Okay, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. All right, so let me just finish and then we can discuss everything you guys want. So on a pulp, directly on the pulp, it's very difficult to actually guarantee that you're going to have 100% of effectiveness. It's going to be almost impossible. Why? Because there are many variables that you have to consider whenever you're going to do a direct pulp capping, you know, symptoms and how long did it take you to control the hemorrhage, and you know, the size of the exposure, the amount of decay that was around. I mean, so many variables. All right, but when you go deep into the dentin without being directly on the pulp, it's going to work 100% of the time. When you place something that releases calcium, it's going to work 100% of the time on the dentin. It's going to release the calcium, it's going to generate an alkaline pH, it's going to promote healing, it's going to promote pulp vitality, and it's going to induce hydroxyapatite crystal precipitation into the dentin. It's going to happen. All right, there's nothing that should avoid that. Nothing that should avoid that. All right, so when you think about your classical case of doing a pulp capping, this is it. You know, you have a tooth. This is textbook. You know, small exposure, hemorrhage was controlled. The patient didn't have any symptoms. The patient was a young patient, and sure, all these variables considered, you know, they look like, or they feel like the pulp exposure will work. Okay. However, there are cases where pulp exposure coverage is not going to work, such as this. So this is where you start thinking about, well, if you apply something like biodentine or TheraCal here, that's not going to work. This is where you need to do endo. So you need to consider all these, you know, all these factors. However, in all deep preparations, a calcium releasing material is definitely going to work. Okay, a calcium releasing material is definitely going to work. I'm getting all right. Okay, Busca, I will answer your questions at the end. Okay, I will answer your questions at the end. Do not ask questions now, brother. I will answer your questions at the end. All right, thank you. All right, so you need in deep preparations, you can apply your calcium releasing materials such as TheraCal, and it's going to provide you that benefit. And the reason why these products work so well, at least TheraCal LC, is because TheraCal LC has this matrix that allows for ion exchange. So at the beginning, when DiCal was developed, it's a good material, but it's very soluble. So what happened was that over time it dissolved, okay? It wasn't resistant, it was very soluble. So what companies did was took resin and added the calcium hydroxide into the resin, and now it became light cured. So that's a great idea. However, resins tend to be very hydrophobic, and that hydrophobicity does not allow for ion exchange, okay? It doesn't allow for ion exchange because you need for water to go in and for calcium silicate to come out. So what Bisco did is they developed this resin matrix that is hydrophilic, this technology that will allow for water to go in and for calcium to be released. Okay, so it took us a while, it took us about 12 years, 15 years to develop this type of technology, but now we have mastered it and we're developing more and more type of materials that do this. It's called the Thera technology or the Thera family of products. You have water going in, calcium being released, but the material remains insoluble or very, very little solubility. So now you have calcium release, alkaline pH generation, pulp vitality promotion. You know, you're promoting pulp healing, you're promoting hydroxyapatite crystal precipitation, and you're, yes, promoting dentin bridge formation. All these things happen just because of the calcium release, but you must have a good amount of calcium being released from that material, okay, in order to generate that environment, okay? And right now, I'm going to share this with you. This is just an old, not old, this is a study, third-party study, and I'm sorry, but I think that I'm missing part of this. Well, anyway, this is a study done by Professor Salvatore Saudo from University of Valencia, Spain. And those of you who don't know who he is, you can check his Facebook page. It's called Dental Biomaterials Research Group. It's one of the largest in the world. It's really interesting. A lot of smart people are in that page, and he's the leader of that. So he's done a lot of work on remineralization. We do not, as a company, claim that we use the word, we don't use the word remineralization. We use the term Denton Bridge formation, okay? But remineralization is something that is being studied tremendously right now. Which materials are capable of providing this type of feature or benefit? Well, feature, remineralization. So Dr. Saudo did the study, and he used composite, regular composite, glass ionomer. He used biodentine, or I'm sorry, MTA and TheraCal. And the two top images right here are composite and glass ionomer. There is no remineralization going on. But in the lower images, you can see all these either needles or crystals that are being, generated because of the presence of MTA and the presence of TheraCal. So right now, you're seeing more and more proof that these type of materials are inducing remineralization, which is a wonderful thing. So now you got true reasons on why it's interesting to use these materials as liner or bases. All right, so anywhere that you have something deep, you should be using, TheraCal LC. So this right here in this actual wall, right here, and right here is a place where TheraCal LC will definitely be effective, right here and right here, right here in this actual wall, right here. This is where TheraCal LC will work as an insulating agent. And then, of course, it will release a lot of calcium. It will generate that alkaline pH. It will generate a good environment, promoting pulp vitality and pulp healing. And it will also induce the precipitation of hydroxyapatite. So this is something to consider. Where are you going to use it and why? So where? Anywhere in the deep prep. Why? Because of all the things that I said. You want that alkaline pH. You want that calcium release, which is a good thing. So I'm going to show you a little case done by a friend of mine in Argentina. So Dr. Durando, he shared this with me last year. So what do we see here? A lot of decay. And we have old DiCal, very mushy, is dissolved. It doesn't look good. So of course, isolation is always a key. And he removes all the decay with hand instruments, okay? He scoops it out. And then he uses something called AquaCare, which is a sandblaster. When intraoral sandblaster, when he uses an intraoral sandblaster, he's being a little bit more, what's the term, conservative in the removal of that decayed tissue, that dentin that can be removed. And he has told me that he has minimized the use of rotary instruments for caries removal, and he's using sandblasting more and more. Okay, and this is a thought process, a philosophy, an approach, but I thought that I would share this with you. And then, of course, you see this deep area where, this is very close to the pulp. This is very close. And he just puts some TheraCal in there, okay? So one thing about TheraCal is that if you don't place it properly, it might flake away. So the first thing is you need to have moisture. You need for the dentin to be moist. You need that water in there to interact with the TheraCal. And then when you place it there, right, it's going to stay in place. Okay, the second thing is that you need to place it in a very thin layer. That thin layer has to be less than 1 millimeter. Why? Because as you can see, TheraCal is very opaque. So when you light cure it, if it's too thick, it's not going to cure properly in the bottom. wherever it's in contact with the dentin, it's not going to cure. And what's going to happen is that it's going to fall off. And also, uncured resin is not good. You need to make sure you properly polymerize this. So you need to cure it for 20 seconds, okay? But you need to place it in a very thin layer. One, to avoid for the material to fall off, and two, to make sure it is properly polymerized, because uncured monomers, uncured resin are not good. If you place this on a vinyl pulp and you don't polymerize it properly, if it's too thick, and then what you're going to have is uncured resin on top of the pulp. And that's not good. That's very toxic. But if you cure it well, immediately in 20 seconds, now you don't have uncured resin. Now you have a fully polymerized layer of TheraCal that is going to start releasing calcium and activating the whole process. So you got to make sure, one, moist dentin, moist, not super wet, but moist. Two, the layer has to be about 1 millimeter and less than 1 millimeter. And three, proper polymerization, good light, 20 seconds. And after he's done, he uses a selective etch technique. You can do total etch if you want. Some people like to put glass ionomer on the top. You don't need to do that. You can do your bonding directly and you're good. So Dr. Durando does the selective etch technique, and then he uses, in this case, he's using all bond universal, and then he's, doing his bonding. You should not do the bonding before placing any of these materials, because you want these materials to be in direct contact with your dentin. You need for the materials to be in direct contact with your dentin. Otherwise, it's not going to work, because what you have on the dentin now is your bonding agent, and the calcium from the TheraCal is not going to go through the adhesive and then into the dentin. It's not going to be able to do that. So you're going to lose all the features and benefits of the material. You want to make sure you place it directly on dentin, and then on top of that, you do your bonding procedure. So I got friends from all over. Dr. Castro, he's from Nicaragua, and he tells me, Rolando, I use TheraCal on every composite restoration that I do routinely, and he wrote to me once, and he wrote that, and I said, well, and that's great. And he said, I just like to have that calcium release. I just like to have that environment. I just like to have that healing ability, the pulp vitality promotion. I want that in every restoration. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. So this case is really interesting because you can see he's got sclerotic dentin. So, that's a totally super dense kind of dentin, hypercalcified. That's protecting right there. But regardless, he applied his TheraCal on top of it. And then, he did his composite restoration. So it's a matter of choice, okay? People think that every composite restoration should have TheraCal. Other people will only use it in deep preps. Other people will not use it as a pulp capping agent, but as a liner. It all depends, but all depends on your approach. But you need to start thinking about using something that releases calcium, generates an alkaline pH, promotes pulp vitality, promotes pulpal healing, okay, and induces hydroxyapatite crystal formation. You want to think about that, all right? So here's a little video of how to place TheraCal. And, the dentin is moist. Hopefully you're able to see the video. The dentin has to be moist. Okay, you apply a layer of TheraCal that is less than 1 millimeter in thickness. These are extracted teeth. So I use them for teaching purposes, okay? This is not a real patient. So we're going to light cure that layer of TheraCal 20 seconds, okay? 20 seconds. And after I'm done with the light curing procedure, I'm going to do my bonding. So in this case, I'm going to show both bonding procedures that you can use. One of them is a total etch technique, and the other one is selective etch technique. Okay, you can use either one. It doesn't really matter. Okay, and as you can see, I'm going to rinse this away. I'm going to use spray. I'm going to place the adhesive. I'm going to scrub it. And TheraCal is going to remain in place. It's not going to flake away. Why? Because I placed it on moist dentin. I placed it on a layer less than 1 millimeter, and I light cure it properly. As long as you do that, you shouldn't have any problems, okay? And then I'm applying the adhesive, and then you apply, in this case, I'm using All Bond Universal. You apply 2 consecutive layers, air dry, and then light cure, okay? That's your application method. So this is a TheraCal LC. Now let's talk about a new material that we just launched called TheraCal PT. Now, TheraCal PT, the reason for TheraCal PT to exist is that a lot of people started using TheraCal LC for pulpotomies, and we started getting all this feedback. TheraCal LC is not indicated for pulpotomy. Why? First of all, it's light cured. So when you're deep in a chamber, the more you are away from the light, the more, you know, your polymerization possibility with your curing light is diminished. You know, the more distance you put from your light, the less amount of energy is going to hit that material. Also, you don't put a 1 millimeter layer of material when you do a pulpotomy. You put more. Why? Because you are in the chamber. You want to fill that chamber. So people started doing this, and we were telling them, hey, this is not indicated for this. And people were saying, oh, but it's working. And we cannot be responsible for something that is considered off-label. Because in the instructions, when you read the instructions, whether you have them on paper or you go online on, you know, bisco.com, it will tell you the indications of that material, where you can use it, and it will explain to you how to use it. Every material is like that. Every material has instructions for use. So TheraCal LC is not indicated for that, for pulpotomy. So we decided to develop a product that is specifically designed for those people who want to do pulpotomy treatments, okay? And they want to have the benefits of calcium release. So we developed TheraCal PT. PT stands for pulpotomy treatment. It is a calcium silicate containing material. It is resin-based, but this one is dual cured. So now you don't have to be too concerned about the thickness of the layer, because it's, whether you hit it with a light or not, it's going to polymerize. You hit it with a light, it cures. Oh, but it didn't, I put more than 1 millimeter. It doesn't matter, because now it's going to cure chemically, all right? It's a Thera technology type of material, and it's a way, a Thera way of doing pulpotomies. So the features is that releases calcium, all right? And the alkaline pH you achieve goes to 11.5 after 7 days, okay? So it actually becomes alkaline fairly quick. It is radiopaque. You can see it in an X-ray. And when you're working with kids, you got to work fast. Okay, I've gotten some questions about being able to use this in partial pulpotomies. There are countries where this is very popular. You can use this for partial pulpotomies. You can use this for any pulpotomy treatment, okay? Definitely can use it, all right? So when you look at, let's say, a clinical case of people using TheraCal PT, this is, of course, a deciduous tooth. Is a child, and you can see that big caries right there on the X-ray. And here's the clinical image of that patient. So this is a case from Dr. Cabanillas in Mexico. And of course, he's going to isolate, and he's going to remove, he's going to open that chamber. He's going to perform the pulpotomy following whatever protocol you feel you need to follow. I am certain that Dr. Cabanillas he uses sodium hypochlorite, okay, to control the hemorrhage. He cleans it, and then he applies TheraCal PT in that chamber, fills it up, and then after he's done that, he's going to use selective etch technique, and then he's going to use his bonding technique, okay? And in this case, he used a composite, and then he finished off the restoration. Now, some people tell me that all pulpotomy cases in children have to be covered with a stainless steel crown. I spoke with Dr. Cabanillas. I am not an expert in pedo, in children's dentistry, and he tells me, well, things are changing now. With the new era of bonding, you can actually do very predictable restorations in pulpotomized teeth, and they will, you know, hang on for the amount of time that is required, because you have to remember these teeth are going to exfoliate and you're going to have a permanent tooth coming out. So this is the x-ray, and you can see the material. It's a very well done pulpotomy, and then there's the composite. And I believe that he shared with me a 1.5 year follow-up where that tooth was being extracted because it exfoliated. So the patient went to his office, the mother took the child to his office, the tooth was loose, he just removed it, and he said, yep, it did what it was supposed to do. You know, no images, x-ray, no symptoms, and the pulp was vital all the way to the end. So that is something to consider about these two types of materials, okay? Now, there is a third material that also has this technology. It's called TheraCal. TheraCal has the Thera technology, releases calcium, generates an alkaline pH. It's capable of promoting pulp vitality. It's capable of promoting pulp healing, okay? And it will generate the ability for hydroxyapatite crystal formation, all right? Now, here's the deal with TheraCal. TheraCal is a self-adhesive cement, okay? And it not only has the calcium silicate, but it also has MDP. So it can bond to surfaces like zirconia, to surfaces like dentin, enamel, metal, without the use of any additional primer, okay? So it's very convenient to use. It's fast, it's easy, and it provides a bunch of different features that no other self-adhesive cement does, which is the calcium release. So when you have the combination of good bonding with the calcium release, now we're talking about a material that is way superior than everything in its category. We are very proud of TheraCal. We believe it's a great material. It generates, the people that use it really like it, because you're not only providing bond to zirconia or bond to metal or bond to the tooth, but you're also providing that calcium release ability upon contact with the tooth. And now you have all the benefits that the calcium is able to generate on that tooth, where you're placing a crown or an onlay or an inlay, or you're doing a bridge, okay? And that's something really interesting. So here's a case, and I will go through this case again when we discuss zirconia, but this is a case by Dr. Sebastian Jordan, and you can see here that the patient had a crown that had failed, and he exchanged it, he removed it. The patient had a core made out of metal, gold. He decided to just leave it. So he took an impression of that. Actually, he scanned it. He had a zirconia crown made, tried it in, he cleaned it. I'll talk about that later. And then he applied TheraCal. And then he delivered the material. You can see TheraCal is very opaque. So that's something to consider. But then you cure it, you tack cure it or flash cure it for 2 to 3 seconds, and you are capable of removing that excess fairly easy. But also you need to think that here in that interface, you're gonna have an alkaline pH. And think of all the benefits that alkaline pH is able to generate, all right? So I wanted to share that with you. I'm going to stop sharing this slide, and I'm gonna move to the other presentation. Okay, Cassandra, are you following me?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. So let's do a little bit of zirconia bonding so we can, all right, let me just close this one. And, okay, hold on. I am making a couple of mistakes here. Share screen, zirconia bonding, share that screen. Here we go. We already talked about the process. Can you see that slide, Cassandra, that says chemical interaction?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we already discussed this. Let me just fit this slide. Wonderful. Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about zirconia. All right. Zirconia is a ceramic. It's not a metal. Even though zirconium is, element number 40 in the periodic table, and it is a metal. What we use in dentistry is not zirconium, is zirconium oxide. So it is a ceramic. However, it doesn't contain any silica. So you cannot etch it with hydrofluoric acid, and silane will not work. It will just not work. All right. Now, one thing that happens with this is that zirconia and saliva will react, and it will become contaminated. So when saliva reacts with zirconia, what's going to happen is that your bonding ability is diminished because of that contaminated surface. Okay. So in order to bond to zirconia, there are no secrets here. There are no secrets. You have the process: mechanical retention, chemical interaction, and a clean surface. So most of people around the world, dentists, have their lab sandblast their zirconia. It's a fact, okay? Their lab does the sandblasting. So when you receive the restoration, the surface has been already sandblasted. So now you call your patient in, you're going to try it in. As soon as you try it in, it becomes contaminated. So now you need to clean it. And then you're going to prime it, and then you're going to cement it. All right? That is the protocol. Now, when you have a sandblaster in your office, you can try it in, you clean it, and then you sandblast it. And that way you finish cleaning all that surface. And then you rinse it, you prime it, and then you cement it. You can do that too. But most people have their lab do their sandblasting for them. If you have a sandblaster, or if you're planning on getting a sandblaster, you need to make sure that you use 50 micron aluminum oxide powder, all right? You use a pressure of 40 PSI or 2.8 bars, and you should blast this for no longer than 20 seconds. Keep it at an angle. Doesn't have to be 60 degrees. Just don't keep it perpendicular to the surface, and keep a relative distance. Okay, I always say that the 3 first bullet points are non-negotiable. The last 2, you can negotiate. This is the procedure we do in the lab. This is the way we blast zirconia every time we're going to do a bond strength test. So just for you to know, all right? If you're planning on getting a blaster, a sandblaster for your office, you need to set it up this way, okay? And this way, it will also work on metal or composite. But for zirconia, it's very specific, all right? And then you can use a primer. Primer, you have many primers out there, okay? These are the primers that we test all the time. Z Prime Plus, which is the first primer that came to the market, the first one that is dedicated to zirconia. It will also work on metal and also on indirect composites. It will work, but it's specifically designed for zirconia. It contains MDP. Monobond Plus and Ceramic Primer Plus will also work, okay? So you have these materials here. These are the primers. You should have a dedicated primer that contains MDP to bond to zirconia. That is a must, because MDP provides the best bonding to zirconia possible, all right? And you have a couple of cleaners out in the market. You have products like Zirclean and Ivoclean. Ivoclean was the first one, Zirclean followed, and there's another one right now from Curare called Catanaclean. I just need to update my slide. I keep forgetting. All right, but why do we need to clean it? Because people tell me, oh, I use ethanol, I use acetone, I use, a vast array of different solutions and techniques. Okay, so basically, when you're doing a restoration, you can make it out of metal, lithium disilicate, feldspathic porcelain, glass ceramics, composite, and zirconia. But these 4, specifically metal, lithium disilicate, composite, and zirconia, are the most popular indirect restoration surfaces out there right now in the world, okay? Somebody's doing right now a metal restoration, an Emax restoration, an indirect composite restoration, or a zirconia restoration, for sure, okay? So what happens is that when you try in this restoration, the surface is going to be in contact with saliva. It's just going to happen. It's unavoidable, okay? Saliva will not have an impact on metal. Saliva will not have an impact on Emax, and saliva will not have an impact on composite. But saliva will have an impact on zirconia, for sure, okay? So the theory is that there is phosphate groups in saliva that will bond to zirconia. And when you bond to zirconia, after that, when you apply your primer doesn't have anywhere to bond to because the saliva has depleted the bonding sites of zirconia. You don't have anything to bond to. So your primer is not going to be effective. So you cannot blame it on the primer. Oh, I use Bisco primer, it doesn't bond. Well, that's not true. It does bond. Or I use Ivoclar's primer. It didn't bond. Well, that's not true because Ivoclar's primer also bonds. And Curare's primer also bonds. However, if your surface is contaminated, Z prime, Monobond, or Curare's product, none of them are going to work. So you need to remove this contaminated surface. And the way to do that is by using a universal cleaning gel, such as Zirclean, okay? And that Zirclean is going to provide you with a lot of, how do you call it? It's gonna make you feel secure about your bond. You're gonna be reassured that by cleaning this, you're going to achieve the best bond possible. So let me just go through, these are just, we did some shear bond strength tests. So we use a self-adhesive cement, in this case, TheraCal, that contains MDP. And then we use on another group, the primer contains MDP, in this case, Z prime, and then a dual cure resin cement, which is dual link universal. So we had, everything was done on zirconia. We had contamination, we had with saliva and no cleaning, with no contamination whatsoever. And then we had saliva cleaning with water, saliva cleaning with Zirclean, with both types of permutation. And we did a shear bond strength test, Ultradent. This is our standard method of testing, and this is what we found. When no contamination, no cleaning, we got the bond strength as expected. TheraCal about 26, Z prime, and dual link about 31. And then we contaminated the surface and cleaned it with water, TheraCal went down to 9, significantly. And when using Z prime, you know, it went down also to 9. So we're talking about a reduction of almost 60% of your bond strength. But then after using Zirclean, bond strength went up. Bond strength went up. It is a little higher, but they are not statistically different. They are not. They're the same bond, okay? So you went to losing about 60% of your bond, then going back to where you were. So using a surface cleaner does have an effect on bond. You're able to reach your optimized bond over again. We also did this with different surfaces, okay? And we found that for the most part, saliva doesn't have a lot of effect on other surfaces, you know, such as like Emax. Yeah, your bond strength goes down a little bit, but then when you clean it, it goes up again. Same thing with stainless steel. There isn't a significant difference, but it doesn't hurt to use your cleaning agent on any surface. So when you're bonding to zirconia, it's always good. It's always recommended that after trying, you use a surface cleaner in order to get your bond strength up, okay? That is key. And that might be the reason why many people are having failures when bonding to zirconia, okay? Because they are not cleaning the surface. And that is very, very, very important, okay? So here is the same case I just went through. You know, I just went through this case. This is a zirconia restoration that was sandblasted, tried in, and then zircline. Very important step. If you don't zircline it, and then your TheraCal or your MDP containing cement is not going to work. You dispense your cement on a clean zirconia surface, you seat the restoration, cure for about 2 seconds, remove the excess, and there you have it, final restoration, okay? So that is very important to understand. Cleaning is something that people haven't thought of a lot, but it has been documented in the literature that saliva has a detrimental effect on the bond of zirconia to zirconia. So it's always good, not always good, it's recommended to use a surface cleaner after trying. And then you can do your cementation, whether you're using an MDP containing cement or if you're going to use an MDP containing primer. But you need to clean that surface. That is going to be key to achieve an optimized bond to zirconia. Well, thank you very much for today. Now I'm ready for questions. All right, Cassandra, are you with me?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Okay, awesome. You can start typing your questions on the Q&A section. Okay, Buxa. I have one case with TheraCal. The patient came back with sensitivity and the doctor checked under the obturation where he puts TheraCal. This was black. Well, maybe the thickness of TheraCal was too much. It didn't cure well and it caused that issue, okay? So you need to think about, and also there are many variables that can have an effect on the success of a direct pulp capping procedure, okay? You cannot only blame it on the TheraCal. We have studies that have shown TheraCal being placed clinically and being effective. Okay, so one case is not going to determine the effectiveness of all cases. Every case has to be considered, individually. All right, so I answered that, I answered that, and I answered that. All right, why dry tooth when using TheraCal? Well, you can use wet bonding also. It doesn't really matter. I think that leaving a little bit of moisture is always better because when you have a little bit of moisture, it's going to provide that calcium release ability to kick off faster, okay? I think that leaving the surface moist is better. If you read the instructions of TheraCal, and I believe that the instructions of TheraCal state that dentin has to be visibly moist, okay? Visibly moist. And I'm going to look for that right now, and hopefully I am going to be able to share it with you. But as I understand it, the instructions say that it should be used on, hold on. Surface restoration. It's not telling me here. It's not telling me here exactly what is the amount of moisture that we need to leave on the restoration, but definitely not dry. Definitely not dry. We should always leave the dentin a little bit moist. Okay. right here it says, okay, so, you know, I'm going to share this right here, and you're going to see it. Cassandra, can you see the instructions?
Yes.
Okay. So right here where it says instructions for use, right here it says number 4, remove all surface water using a strong stream of air on the prep. Do not desiccate.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you should not be desiccating anything at all, ever, when using TheraCal. No desiccation. And to me, dry, that's it. Leave a little bit of moisture. You mentioned dry tooth in one of the Bisco bites. I mentioned dry tooth because what you don't want is excess water. You want to leave it with a little bit of water. And I try to explain the difference between dry and wet. So, but Dragos, oh my God, my dear friend, how you doing? If I was mistaken, we're going to remove the Bisco bite from the internet, Dr. Dragos. And that way, people will not be confused. You need to leave it a little bit moist, okay? Some people tell me, I like to dry the dentin, and it works for them. Other people tell me, I always leave it a little moist, and it works for them. So there is, how do I say it? A little bit of leeway, a little bit of a range, and people find their comfort zone, and they work with that. I would recommend to leave it a little bit moist, okay? Because you want that water in the system, okay? So, I think, yes.
Yeah, when you say moist, would you gauge it like a glistening moist?
Yes, a glistening moist. A glistening moist. It needs to look shiny with no pooling of water on the dentin. So hold on a minute. I'm going to go, hold on. I am going to open something up, and I want to see if I can find it. All right. I'm going to see if I can find it. And if I can find it, here we go. And I'm going to show you again. I'm going to try to show it again. Here we go. That's what it should look like. Can you see that, Cassandra?
Yes.
All right. That is what dentin should look like. Moist with no excess water on top of it. You don't have pooling of water, but the dentin is not super dry. It just doesn't have excess water, but it's shiny. It's got some moisture, and that is the perfect dentin to bond to with any Thera family product. With any Thera family product. All right, so I'm looking at here, but somewhat more moist in the case of TheraCal, right? Well, Dr. Dragos, I guess that you're gonna have to find your sweet spot. We call it sweet spot. There is that thing that only you can assess of what moist really means. There is a little bit of more moisture. It's difficult for me to explain it. Like, I will need to be with you, and we will both look at the dentin, and I will tell you, this is what I'm looking for. But to explain it like this is a little bit more complex. So it's kind of like up to you to understand what is it that you're looking for, and explain that to the people when you lecture and when you share information. All right, let me see which other questions I have. TheraCal PT is not available in Europe yet. I am so sorry, but now you know that that is outside. I was going to talk about biomaterials, and those are the ones that we have. I apologize for that, Cassandra. I did not think about that, but I got excited because I love talking about this stuff. Hello, Chaim. Chaim from Israel is logging in. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. Geez, Chaim, I saw a picture of you the other day. You look wonderful. You look like $1 million, man. All right, so I think that I have answered everything, Cassandra. I don't have any more questions here.
Okay.
And I think we're done. We're 3 minutes over time. We had at a specific moment, we had 130 participants. Right now we got 99. I guess people needed to leave, and that's okay. We will have a list of people that attended, and I will share that with you. This recording I will share with you probably in about half an hour, because I need to get an email from Zoom saying that it's available.
Okay.
And then you can share that with anyone who requested, okay?
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone,
Okay.
for participating.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. You have an email, and then in that email, you have the possibility to ask questions. And if I get those questions, I will answer them as soon as I can. Okay? You guys take care. Have a wonderful day.